When the scouts of the Red Army and specialized Allied intelligence teams crossed the border of Lower Silesia in the early, misty spring of 1945, their expectations were shaped by years of conventional warfare. They expected the smell of diesel, heaps of twisted steel, the charred remains of tanks, and demoralized German troops in retreat. Instead, deep within the Sowie mountain range, they stumbled upon a silence that was deeper and more eerie than any battlefield. Emerging before them were surreal, massive concrete structures, known today as the Henge, rings of reinforced concrete that stood like a modern, brutalist Stonehenge in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles of thick, insulated electrical cables leading into the bowels of the earth. In those dark, damp corridors of the Wenceslaus Mine, the air was still saturated with a strange, sharp scent of ozone and something inexplicably metallic. It was clear that the Nazis had been working on something here that was not intended for an ordinary front line, nor for human understanding at that time. It was the moment of the first encounter with Project Glocke, the Nazi bell, a mystery that would remain the most closely guarded secret of the world's intelligence services for decades, buried under layers of censorship and fear. To even begin unraveling the mystery of the bell, we must confront the figure of the man who was the brain of the entire operation. SS General Hans Kammler was not just another officer in the hierarchy of the Reich. He was the technical genius of darkness, the man entrusted with everything that was deemed impossible. He was in charge of the production of V-2 rockets, jet engines, and the construction of colossal underground facilities where slaves worked to death. While Berlin burned, Kammler retreated into mountain fortresses, carrying with him secrets that, according to some documents, could have changed the outcome of the war in a single hour. He was the only one who possessed the complete picture of Project Chronos. Documents that the Allies later feverishly sought describe him as a man obsessed with a blend of occultism and advanced quantum physics, a leader who believed that true power lay not in the number of divisions, but in the total control over zero-point energy and the very fabric of space and time. His mysterious disappearance in May 1945, along with all the key blueprints and scientists associated with the bell, remains to this day the greatest unsolved enigma of the Second World War. At the very heart of the bell, within its metal shell lined with ceramics, there was no conventional piston engine or early nuclear reactor. Secret records reached by the Allies after the war, through questioning surviving technicians, speak of a substance under the code name Zerum 525. It was described as a thick liquid resembling mercury but of a deep, dark red color, housed in two massive glass cylinders that rotated in opposite directions at incredible speeds. When these cylinders were exposed to extremely high-voltage electricity from a nearby hydroelectric plant, the bell would begin to emit an eerie, violet light and produce a sound that reminded witnesses of a hive of angry bees. Scientists whom the Americans later transferred as part of Operation Paperclip claimed that Zerum 525 was not just fuel, but the key to creating torsion fields. The goal was almost unthinkable, to create an energy bubble that would negate gravity and allow the object to move without any air resistance or inertia. It was a science that fled the framework of 1945, born in minds that had long ago discarded all ethics in exchange for absolute power. The Nazi obsession with anti-gravity was not just a triumph of engineering. It was a massive human slaughterhouse in the name of science. Every time the bell was activated within its concrete chamber, the price was paid in human lives with surgical precision. Prisoners from the nearby Gross-Rosen camp system were treated as expendable commodities, forced to clean the test chambers immediately after the machine was shut down, without any protective equipment. Reports leaked from the confidential archives of the SS freeze the blood in one's veins. They described people whose cellular structure would literally turn into a gelatinous mush under the influence of unknown frequencies emitted by the bell. Even the project's top scientists were not spared. 7 were allegedly killed during the early phases of testing due to blood crystallization in their veins. Documents describe plants that, in the vicinity of the active machine, would rot to the root in seconds, turning into a white, formless slime. This was not just a machine the Allies were looking for. It was an entity that devoured the very life force of everything in its path. Allied maps from 1945 reveal something that stunned Generals Eisenhower and Bradley: the existence of Project Reese, or the Giant. Beneath the mountains of Poland, the Nazis had built an entire underground world, a system of tunnels and halls so vast that entire cities could fit inside. The maps show incredible precision and planning. Each hall had a specific purpose in the development of the Wunderwaffe, and the bell was the crown jewel in that dark kingdom. While American troops fought on the surface, beneath their feet, a technological revolution was unfolding that was meant to ensure the survival of the Reich even if Berlin fell. The animation of these maps today shows how close the Nazis were to achieving an impregnable fortress. Every red dot on those maps marks a tunnel entrance, and every blue line the flow of electricity that fed the hungry machines in the depths. The Allies realized they had won the war on the surface, but they almost lost the battle for the future that was being forged in the darkness of the Sowie Mountains. In the most strictly guarded documents seized by the American Intelligence Service, blueprints were found that look more like science fiction than military plans from the 1940s. These were disc-shaped aircraft known as Henge. According to these blueprints, these craft would not use propellers, wings, or even the jet engines that were the pinnacle of technology at the time. They were meant to carry the Bell technology at their core, using the rotation of Zerum 525 to create their own gravitational field. Imagine an object that can accelerate from 0 to 5,000 kilometers per hour in the blink of an eye, capable of making turns at angles that would crush any human pilot in a conventional aircraft. The Nazis planned these discs as the ultimate interceptors that would wipe Allied bombers from the sky, without the crews even seeing what hit them. While there is no firm evidence that the Henge ever flew in a full capacity, the mere fact that such plans existed and were worked on by top minds forced the Allies into a massive search for every fragment of blueprints before they fell into Soviet hands. As the noose around Germany tightened, Project Glocke was not destroyed, it vanished. In the final weeks of the war, the movement of secret convoys toward the Norwegian coasts and Spanish ports was recorded. Navy documents suggest that the most advanced Type XXI submarines, which could remain submerged for weeks, loaded unknown, heavy crates under strict SS supervision. There are theories, supported by partial reports, that the Bell, along with Hans Kammler and key scientists, was evacuated to South America or even Antarctica. American radars at the time recorded unexplained objects over the Atlantic moving at speeds unknown to aviation of the era. Did the Bell ever reach its destination? Or did it become part of a secret exchange between the Nazi leadership and the Allies in return for freedom? That is a question that still haunts historians studying the final hours of the Third Reich. While the world celebrated victory, another secret war was taking place in the shadows. Operation Paperclip was an American mission to find and recruit Nazi brains before the Russians could get to them. The Americans were not just looking for rocket experts like Wernher von Braun. They were looking for the men who worked on the physics of the Bell. Many of those scientists, instead of being in the dock at Nuremberg, ended up in the laboratories of New Mexico and Ohio. They were given new identities, clean biographies, and unlimited resources to continue their work, but this time under the American flag. The Allies were shocked by the depth of their knowledge of matter and energy. In interrogations that only recently became available to the public, these scientists speak of the Bell not as a weapon, but as a gateway to a new physics. America bought their silence and their genius, laying the foundations for the space race and modern military technology on the ruins of Nazi secrets. 20 years after the end of the war, in 1965, in the small American town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, something happened that reawakened the ghosts of Project Glocke. Residents witnessed an unknown object crashing into the woods. Witnesses who arrived at the scene before the military cordoned off the entire area described an object that bore an incredible resemblance to the Nazi Bell blueprints, a bell-shaped metallic object with strange hieroglyphs around the rim. The military quickly hauled the object away to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the same base where the documents from Operation Paperclip ended up. Was Kecksburg the result of an American attempt to replicate Kammler's technology? Was the Bell, after 2 decades of refinement and secret bases, finally ready for flight? The similarity between the Nazi sketches from 1945 and the object from 1965 is far too great to be a mere coincidence. To fully understand the roots of the bell, we must dive into the dark world of Nazi occultism. Hans Kammler and Himmler did not rely on classical physics alone. They were deeply connected to societies like Thule and Vril. They believed the bell was a way to access Vril energy, a mythical force that permeates the universe. Their documents speak of channeling energy through ancient symbols and specific resonances of metal. For them, technology and magic were the same thing. The bell was envisioned as a mechanical medium that would connect the human mind with the energy of the stars. American investigators were taken aback by the amount of esotericism in the technical manuals for Zerum 525. This fusion of the most advanced electronics and the oldest magical beliefs created something that even modern science cannot fully decipher today. Today, when we look at modern stealth aircraft like the B-2 or the latest prototypes of unmanned aerial vehicles, we cannot help but wonder how much of Project Glocke's genes remain within them. Silent propulsion systems, unusual materials that absorb radar radiation, and the ability of aircraft to perform maneuvers that defy physics. All of this traces its roots back to the mountains of Lower Silesia. While official history claims the bell was just a failed experiment, the amount of secrecy that still surrounds the Sowie Mountains and Project Chronos tells a different story. Technology does not disappear, it only moves into the shadows. What began as a desperate attempt by a failing regime to stop the Allies became the foundation for black budgets and secret space programs that shape our present without us even being aware of it. The story of the Nazi bell is not just the story of a machine. It is a warning of what happens when genius falls into the hands of those who have no conscience. It is the story of a dark legacy that the Allies inherited and chose to keep for themselves. As we slowly zoom in on the empty concrete rings of the Henge that still stand in Poland today, we are reminded that some secrets are too dangerous to ever be fully revealed to the public. The bell may have been driven away long ago. Hans Kammler may have found refuge in the shadows, but the idea of control over the universe itself has remained alive. At the end of the film, we are left only with the question, are we the ones controlling the technology, or did the bell, back in 1945, lead us down a path from which there is no return? History will remember it as a wonder waff, but for those who saw it in action, it was and remains a gateway to hell opened in the name of progress.